It's great to be here. I just want to, the reason I'm talking about diversification, obviously something like China, there is so much to talk about, but I think diversification started coming up more and more over the last couple of years with geopolitics. And I think people looked at diversification very one-dimensionally, and I think what I'm trying to talk about today is a little more about how to view diversification. Hopefully it will get you thinking about it slightly differently and more considerations when you do that. But anyone that's been to Shanghai in the last 3 weeks, you may have seen this 30-metre high cruise ship that's docked right in the centre of West Nanjing Road in downtown Shanghai. It is Louis Vuitton's experience centre and one of 60 plus Louis Vuitton stores in mainland China. And if you look at the luxury category in China, it's hurting. It's a pretty tough time right now, but a lot of these Euro and American luxury brands continue to invest. Does anyone want to guess how many Louis Vuitton stores are in India? They'll kill the suspense. A big 5. And I think what that represents is, a lot of people are talking about India as this big market, and I think it's a great thing to explore. But right now, and I think for quite a few years, we still don't have a consumer base en masse that has the budget and the will to purchase premium products, such as what we do so well in New Zealand. And I think it really hit home for me back in 2010. And my wife and I got married here in New Zealand, and our honeymoon was to India, where we were for a few months. And then we crossed the hump over to Beijing, where we studied Chinese. And at the time, everyone was talking about India and China almost in the same sentence. They're both two mega countries, 1.3 billion people, both of them at the time. The economies are about to explode. They're already growing rapidly. And for me, looking at the two countries, and I've travelled and lived all around the world, but looking at the difference between India and China was incredibly stark. The infrastructure, obviously the visible infrastructure, there was no comparison, and this was 15 years ago. But also the infrastructure you don't see. The selling infrastructure, the PCNZs that you get in Shanghai, there's none of that in China. The distribution, all of these kind of companies and support partners that are set up in a market like China that you don't get in India just yet. And I think it's going to be a long time. When you look at the bureaucracy and you look at how things are done, it's quite tough. But I think the chart that really shows it out for me is just good old basic GDP growth. And everyone talks about India growing really rapidly right now. Yeah, but look at that. That is the 15 years from when I first visited both countries, and it's just been phenomenal, China, the growth. Similar ASEAN countries, that's quite a similar line to that India line, a very similar amount. So I think talking about China, they talk about the next China being, and I think it's pretty clear that the next China is still China. And just for some more context, again, some of these big markets people are exploring right now, the Indias, the South Koreas, Indonesias, all significant markets in their own right, particularly when you compare it to a market like New Zealand. But if you look at the entire retail spend of those 3 markets, just the growth in the next 5 years of China's retail market is going to be the same as those entire markets are. So there's an awful lot of growth and an awful lot of untapped opportunity in China. So where is that growth coming from? And I think it's fair to say, again, back in 2010, when I first arrived in China, it was easy. China, you just slap a made in New Zealand sticker on your package and your product and it'd sell. But it's a lot more difficult now, a lot more competitive. But in saying that, there is still a lot of untapped opportunity for growth. And everyone's been talking about lower tier cities for as long as I've been in China. The growth is in the frontier land. Everyone goes to Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. But the rhetoric around lower tier cities versus what's actually happening has been unmatched, in my view, for a long time. They have still been pretty poor out in these lower tier cities. They've been very price conscious. They've bought very utilitarian products, not kind of premium upgrades like New Zealand type products. But that is changing. I think a really good example is EVs. We hear a lot about EVs when we hear about China. But if you look just 6 years ago in 2019, 23% of all EVs sold in these lower tier cities. Fast forward 6 years, 46%. So I think that really represents, when you're out there buying a car, it's a discretionary, but you are not poor. You can afford a car, you can afford to run it, and the plates, etc., etc. In China, if you can afford a car, you can also afford New Zealand products. So I think that's a really good sign, and we're seeing it across the board. Traditional products such as coffee. It was really only the arty, fartsy people in Shanghai originally that drank it. But if you look at a company like Luckin, back in 2022, there were more Luckin coffee cafes just in Tier 1 cities than Tier 3 or Tier 4 and below. By now, just 3 years later, it's almost double that in Tier 3 and 4. Obviously, as a percentage of the population, much lower, but it just is really representative of consumers are getting more sophisticated, they're making discretionary purchases, and those types of purchases that Kiwis can come in. Lululemon, again, one of these very Tier 1 yoga sophisticated brands. A lot of their social media following is some of the top, most engaged consumers come from cities that are Tier 4 and lower, cities you would have never heard of that are real opportunities. So I think Zespri, and we've seen Jason up here with Zespri, really good example. They are one of the most entrenched New Zealand brands in China, and they are only currently in 60 cities. And as of the recent PM delegation signing the MOU, now they're going to 120 cities where they hope to double their sales by the 2034 end of the season. So a lot of real opportunity in these cities. So when I talk about diversification, I think it's important, not just diversification globally, but in China. Stop thinking about just those Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities and start thinking beyond it. And we're hearing a lot today, which is great. And it's good that it's on the radar, a lot of the groundbreaking New Zealand businesses and market. But I think another thing to think about when you're looking at diversification is not just why China is a big market and there's big opportunities in these lower tier cities, but it's also China is in itself diversifying beyond just the domestic market. A lot of Chinese brands now are spreading their wings and exporting particularly to ASEAN countries, to even African countries, Europe, North America. A lot of the types of markets New Zealanders have either been traditionally quite strong in or are looking to diversify into. And I think it's really important that a lot of these Chinese companies have cut their teeth in a developing market. They get markets that are high growth, very digital, going rapidly into maturity. And as a result, they are a force to be reckoned with. And I think you'll see that in the EV industry. A lot of BYD and some of the other auto brands coming out of China have really shaken up the likes of Tesla, but even those traditional companies such as Volkswagen and BMW, which is why you're getting companies like Tesla building their factories in Shanghai, Volkswagen and BMW both investing over €2 billion in R&D centres in China. To quote Volkswagen, "We have to be there." So I think if you are looking to go global, whether it's within China or outside of China, it's really important to understand the China market, the way the businesses operate, so you can then be better prepared for the rest of the world. And it's not just EVs, it's not just smartphones. Our biggest export, dairy. Now, one of the biggest brands in China, Mengniu, they sponsor the Olympics, right up there with Coca-Cola, like the other name brand. Similarly, the FIFA World Cup. These guys are sponsoring the biggest sporting events on the planet. They're not just doing it like they used to get street cred back in their home markets. They're doing it because they want to take on the world. They want, whether they're a dairy brand or an EV company, they see the future growth opportunities outside of China as well as within China. So as a Kiwi, I'm seeing these guys are definitely coming much, much more into our territory than they have in the past. It's not just electronics anymore. And we heard from Kelvin today at Ely, and what a great company that a lot of people outside the dairy industry have probably never heard of. They have been rated the most innovative dairy company in the world quite a few times. The last 6 years, they've been the most valuable dairy company, a dairy brand on the planet. And they've created this dairy Silicon Valley up in northwest China, which has great innovation, the kind of stuff you saw from Nick Mowbray, but not for building houses or toys, but building dairy. And so these guys, they are doing wonderful, very dynamic, very adaptable, very consumer-driven innovations in the market. And I think someone we can really learn from. Now, it really, really hit me. And I'm someone that straddles both New Zealand and China, and obviously our clients are from around the world, so I look all around the world. But really, really, for me, was quite a poignant moment during COVID, when COVID happened. And I think it really hit home just how dynamic and adaptable Chinese companies are. And not just little nimble companies, we're talking massive companies. And I think it comes back to a classic translation of the word Weiji, which means crisis. And when you separate those two characters, the Wei and the Ji, one means opportunity, one means dangerous. So they are prepared to take a risk in that opportunity. And I think that's the mindset that so many Chinese businesses have. And I think it's something we can all learn from. And for me, during COVID, it really hit home. And as everyone here knows, China got COVID first. So they had no one else to learn from. They were blazing the trail of adapting to this horrific tragedy of COVID. And I think a really good example of how they adapted was Fresh Hippo. So everyone that exports food and beverage here would know about Fresh Hippo or Hema. And within pretty much a day of the lockdown, Hema came out with this announcement. And they said three things. One, we're not going to shut. Two, we're going to try and keep prices the same as they have been. Because there was a lot of opportunists when demand increased and supply dropped, they tried to push the prices way up. And obviously Beijing shut that down pretty quickly. But they were going to keep prices the same. And three, is they were going to try and keep supply the same as they did. And they also did a whole lot of other cool stuff, like they had like the gift packs that you have, the kiwi fruit gift packs you give at Chinese New Year, because obviously it happened just before Chinese New Year. They got out there and they separated that so everyone could have some kiwi fruit. They did stuff like hospitality workers, which obviously don't have a job during COVID. They used them for the warehouses to repackage goods. The things like the emergency vehicles, the buses that were still running in Wuhan, they got their delivery guys in those to use those buses, get out there and make sure people could get food that were stuck in lockdowns. Incredibly adaptable and incredibly rewarding for them. They got a lot of loyalty as a result. Across the Pacific to New Zealand, and another dynamic New Zealand company, My Food Bag, and I think they have never had such an opportunity. The silver platter that came to them with COVID. Everyone's stuck at home, they need their food delivered. You're never going to have a lower cost of acquisition as a company. So what did they do? They said, okay, guys, we're not taking any more new customers. And you know what some of our loyal customers in the south are? You guys are too far away from our Auckland HQ. You guys can find your own food right now. If they were Chinese, they would have said, look, guys, this is going to be tough, but we got to knuckle in. We got to roll up our sleeves and really get in and dig deep, because we're never going to get another opportunity like this. I don't know how long it's going to be. It might be a month, but we got to work triple time, and we got to make sure we can get food to all of our customers, because we're going to win a whole lot of new customers from this, and many are going to stay with us afterwards. And I think for me, that was a real eye-opener of the difference between the way we sometimes approach business in New Zealand versus the way the Chinese businesses operate. And I think I love New Zealand, and I love our lifestyle and the balance, and we go to the beach and all that, and I think it's important to retain that. But sometimes we just got to muck in and do stuff. And I think seize the opportunity, sometimes dangerous opportunity. I think what that reflects is just how different we are in the way we approach business. And it's lovely to hear from guys like Mahara saying that the way they're operating now is much more like China's speed. So you look at the average Chinese business, they are incredibly dynamic, incredibly adaptable. They take a lot of risks. They throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. And I think we can learn from that. Even consumer brands run like a Silicon Valley startup. And New Zealand brands, we have this incredible platform to build on. We have the most pure, natural products, transparent products on the planet. That's reputation you can't buy. That's incredible. We also have this really good collaborative nature, like the PCNZs, like the grass-fed promotions, things like that. We're happy with the rising tide floats all the ships. We also are quite resourceful and look at problems differently than other places. And it was really nice hearing Nick's presentation today, because for me that was, this guy's taken the best of China. So he's done, what he's doing is very normal in China. A lot of data driven, a lot of really adaptable, the old shot fire, cannonball stuff, the automated factories, all that is normal course of business in China. But he's put on that New Zealand side of things, that really relatable, likeable New Zealandness, that really resourcefulness, that looking at problems differently. And I think as a result, he's obviously been incredibly successful. And I don't see why we can't have 20 or even 100 Nick Mowbray-style companies in New Zealand, because we got the best of both worlds here if we can learn from the Chinese. Just one more learning, just to end on, is that digital. Obviously, everyone talks about China being digital. You've got some real opportunities with the TikToks of the world is now taking off everywhere. That's been around in China for years. And if you look at markets like America, as of last year, the market for social commerce was about $65 billion. McKinsey estimates it'll be $145 billion by 2027. And again, that's why Chinese companies are coming in, and companies like Nick Mowbray's are coming in having learned the trade in China, and they can just run circles around the competition in these other markets. Why Shein, Temu, BYD, all these other companies are doing so well. Meeshui, Luckin, all these other companies you've probably never heard of that are actually starting to expand and spread their wings. So really quick summary, diversification is important. I think as any business, it's prudent, but don't expect any other country to match anything like China's been for the last 15 years. And also view diversification as something you can look to within China, diversifying outside of those traditional first-tier, second-tier markets. I think Chinese brands are increasingly not just, they can be our partners, and the likes of Ely, obviously we're selling them a lot of dairy, but also for the more that value-added space, they can be our competitors, not just within China, but in the whole world. So we've got to act more like them, and they're dynamic, they're hungry, and they're well-rounded. And so why can't we be a bit more like that, plus our awesome New Zealandness? So So China isn't just a large market, but I think any business that wants to export, I think it's an important training ground, just like Volkswagen, just like BMW, just like Mido Q are finding out, and Zespri. It's a really, really good place to cut your teeth and learn how to fight with the best of them and take those lessons outside. So one little bit of self-promotion. If you only remember one thing from today's presentation, I'd recommend going on chinaskinny.com and subscribing to our newsletter, if you're not already. That'll obviously help you learn to be like a Chinese company and be very competitive globally.